Can hear you great.
All right, just want to get that out of the way up front. Hi, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to look at endpoint security and how to maintain continuous visibility, enforcement, and response using BigFix. This webinar is designed to give you an overview of the capabilities and benefits of BigFix. If you want to know more about it after the webinar is over, as Jojo said, you can put a question in the chat window in the WebEx. You can with specific questions, or you can visit www.bigfix.com, and you'll see that later on in the presentation. But please remember to include your contact information when you ask questions so we can get in touch with you if we have to follow up with something after the call is concluded today. James Webb isn't really a household name, and I wonder how many of you know who James Webb was. Well, he was the director of NASA in the 60s when President Kennedy made his famous speech about putting a man on the moon by the end of the decade. James Webb and NASA were faced with having to accomplish a task with, think about this, with tools that had not yet been invented. In one meeting, after he and his staff had spent some time talking about this great big unknown, how to put a man on the moon in 9 years, using technology that did not yet exist, and after going over all of the insurmountable obstacles that lay before them, Mr. Webb asked the group, does anybody want my job? Because frankly, he didn't know how they were going to accomplish this task, putting a man on the moon. I open with this because sometimes we see IT security in the same light, trying to accomplish the impossible, trying to guess what's next, and guarding our environments with tools that we've accumulated that we think or we hope are adequate. And also trying to guard against vulnerabilities in our environment, things we've identified as issues that we know must be remediated, and things we don't even know about, things like zero-day vulnerabilities. And let's face it, we've got a lot of things to protect, issues to prevent, and problems to fix. And we've acquired a lot of tools to do it. But is this the kind of environment that we've created for ourselves? I put this slide together after talking to a customer last year who had this very problem, which frankly was why we were having the conversation. They had a tool to manage every aspect of their security infrastructure. But these tools that they had came from 45 different vendors, and none of them talked to each other. They were spending more of their time trying to integrate their tools than they were managing the security of their infrastructure. And they worried they were missing something they couldn't see because they lacked visibility and control in their environment. Things like, how many servers need the most recent patch released this month? Things like how many workstations still needed patches that were released last month or last quarter. Things like making sure all of their endpoints, now this includes workstations and laptops, but it also includes servers, were compliant according to a set of regulatory standards. And we were having our meeting because they realized that this model was not sustainable. With all of the required updates for the tools, the maintenance of the tools, the integration of the tools, and the training on the updates, the maintenance, and the integration, that they were trying to and they couldn't sustain it. Plus, they were trying to manage things that they couldn't control, like zero-day vulnerabilities. And they were trying to amass a set of tools to manage everything, including the unknown. So we talked about the issues they faced for a while, and I discovered something interesting. Because they lacked visibility, they didn't know what they didn't know. And rather than fixing the problems they could identify, the things they knew existed, they had to treat everything, frankly, just like a zero-day vulnerability. Because they didn't know about the problem until it was too late, until they were trying to fix it, rather than prevent the problem from happening in the first place. Now, we shouldn't have to work like this. We should be able to separate the identified vulnerabilities from the unknown problems because there are a lot more vulnerabilities we already know about than things we don't. For instance, when we look into the major breaches in the last 24 months, none of them have been zero-day exploits. They've all involved risks and vulnerabilities we already knew about. And most of these vulnerabilities had not been remediated in over 6 months. Now, I'm not discounting the existence of or the harm that a zero-day attack can bring. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to look at the things we already know, the things we can prevent, the vulnerabilities and shortcomings that we can fix right now. And in order to do that, we've got to overcome the delineations that exist in the security world. We've seen a lot of organizations gradually integrating defenses or security and operations teams, but problems still exist. We've got sporadic, inefficient, unprioritized endpoint management because it sort of still falls into the whole lifecycle management realm. That it's hard to maintain a robust security and compliance posture. We've got disparate tools monitoring various infrastructure components, and they're alerting on everything, or they're alerting on nothing. It's hard to detect what's real and what's not. We've got IT security and IT operations often reporting to different managers, using different tools, following different processes. There's so much back and forth about what needs to be done, what's been done, and how to report on it, that we often lack a clear picture of our security landscape, where we are now and where we need to be. Because of this, our defenses get fragmented and make us slow to respond, which is something in this world we can't afford to do, especially since now we're not just defending the enterprise against attacks, we're having to make sure that every endpoint is compliant as well, because every endpoint is continuously under attack. Every endpoint's a target now. This includes servers as well as workstations and laptops. The endpoint is its own security ecosystem these days. As I said, instead of making sure the enterprise is secure, we now have issues with every endpoint, and instead of trying to secure one environment, we're continuously trying to ward off attacks and solve problems with thousands. And the attacks and problems might be the same, or they might be all different. Brute force attacks aren't the norm anymore. It's small pinpoint attacks geared at gaining access and then doing damage. And as we saw a couple of slides ago, we're not talking about zero-day attacks only. We're talking about attacks that exploit vulnerabilities we already know about. Well, can you manage this type of infrastructure? Identify, remediate, maintain continuous visibility and compliance using the traditional method of scan and fix and scan again and scan and fix and scan again? Well, probably not. But what if there's a way to build an integrated defense that would fix this problem to accomplish that today? What if you had a set of tools that would protect your environment today and into the future? And better yet, what if that set of tools was already integrated? Well, with BigFix, you can do just that. BigFix combines a set of tools that provides the IT security manager continuous visibility into vulnerabilities and provides the IT operations team the tools required to respond to these vulnerabilities. By doing this, BigFix gives you the ability to maintain continuous compliance, not just at the enterprise level, but on every endpoint as well. Now, you can get a more in-depth demonstration on any and all of these tool sets, lifecycle, inventory, patch, and compliance later on just by requesting it in the chat window so that you can see the benefits that each can bring to your environment. At a high level, the 4 tool sets that comprise the BigFix Enterprise System are lifecycle, traditional tools, allow you to discover and manage the lifecycle of endpoints on your network. Includes network discovery, operating system deployment, patch management, software distribution, power management, sequence task automation, and remote control. Inventory gives you the visibility into what software is installed on your endpoints and the ability to report on software license compliance. Patch management, which is also a standalone patch solution, is for patching operating systems, third-party software vendors, and gives you the ability to create patches for your own custom software solutions. Finally, compliance gives you the ability to maintain compliance on every endpoint according to published checklists like DISA STIGs, CIS, PCI, USGCB, and others. It also allows you to customize checklists so you get just what you need in your environment. And if you have any questions on who to contact, please put an, like I said, please put an entry in the chat window and we'll get somebody in touch with you. Now let's jump back to something I mentioned a few minutes ago, continuous compliance and continuous visibility. The Big Fix agent runs continuously in the background of a managed endpoint, and it continuously reports to the server about status. Now, having the Big Fix agent running on the endpoint ensures that any vulnerability discovered on that endpoint is identified and remediated, and any security policies applicable to that endpoint are continuously enforced. We'll spend a little more time looking at each of these terms, visibility, response, enforcement, and what they mean to endpoint security. Notice that I mentioned the word continuously a lot when talking about Big Fix. That's because with Big Fix, visibility, response, and enforcement don't just happen once or even on a schedule. They're continuous. So let's step through this, starting with real-time visibility. Remember what we said on the last slide, you can't secure what you can't see, which means that at some point in the protection of the security ecosystem, we have to discover what we don't know. Let's look at this as the initial Big Fix install. Now, we want the Big Fix agent on every endpoint because it runs continuously in the background, enabling us to gain insight into our endpoints individually and as a whole, and establish that real-time visibility. We also benefit from that visibility when we find out something about a single endpoint, an anomaly, if you will, that's uncovered because of, let's say, a complaint or maybe a trouble ticket. Sometimes the source or reason for this anomaly is unknown. We just know that it exists and it's trouble. Once we discover this anomaly, we need to be able to see if it exists on other endpoints so we can remediate the problem. And Big Fix gives us this capability in real time. We can also use Big Fix to continuously discover assets in our environment. And this is important because we need to know what's plugged into our network. For example, when a server is patched, it's compliant at that point in time. But as time goes by, if it's not patched, it can fall out of compliance. Over 500 patches were released for Server 2012 last year, over 50 of which were critical patches. What this means is that if somebody puts a server on the network today that was built with an image created last year, that server would be missing over a year's worth of patches, including over 50 critical ones. Big Fix does an excellent job of keeping endpoints patched in compliance because you have this continuous visibility. You know what's plugged in and what's installed on each of these plugged in endpoints. Because of this, you know in real time the vulnerabilities in the environment. You don't have to wait for a scan and query a database. Big Fix interrogates each endpoint in real time and provides the information needed to take action, for instance, on a newly built server that has over 50 critical vulnerabilities. You know about it, you can see the vulnerabilities in real time, and you can take action on those vulnerabilities and maintain secure endpoints in your environment. So let's take a look at the Big Fix dashboard and see how we accomplish this real-time visibility. Let's start with the executive dashboard. Now, I feel it's important to mention that Big Fix also has a console that's used by administrators for day-to-day operations. This dashboard has been added to the Big Fix because there are people that need to be able to see real-time data to be able to take critical decisions about their environment. This executive dashboard provides, as they say, a 10,000-foot view into the IT infrastructure. Now think for a minute how this would benefit both operations and security in your environment, whether they're on the same team or different ones. Imagine if they had a view like this into the state of your environment in real time at any given time. You can see real-time metrics, display key information like compliance metrics, or you can get an overview of patches, devices, tasks, and then the like. It's got an activity list, so you can view metrics behind, say, the operation team's current activities. You can also view the top 10 deployed patches and newly released patches. You can also customize views. You can add predefined tiles. You could add different types of custom tiles, and you can create customized views to display real-time data in the dashboard. All of this information allows you to make informed decisions based on what's happening right now in your environment, and you've got shared information. You also have the ability to interrogate your environment for anomalies that you may discover. Now, both IT security and IT operations can use a tool like this to easily and quickly hunt for real-time endpoint data. And as we talked about a few minutes ago, anomalies are out there. They exist. Sometimes there isn't a fix yet. Sometimes a patch hasn't been written yet. Or sometimes you discover something on one endpoint and you want to know if it exists on other endpoints. For instance, an email is received by one employee and it creates a file on their machine. And that file allows an attacker access to key information on that endpoint. Remember what we said, attacks aren't really brute force anymore. They're pinpoint attacks geared at getting in and gaining information. We find out that this has happened, and we need to know right now if that file exists on other machines in our environment. So we know about the name of the file, and we know where it is, and we know the size of it, and we know how it got there. And we need to see what other machines in the environment is it on. The Big Fix query allows us to do just that. We can interrogate endpoints in real time and get data back in seconds. We can view real-time and accurate data on our endpoints. And it's built on the power of the proven Big Fix relevance language. We can target individual endpoints or we can target groups. We've got predefined queries to enable rapid time to value, so you can start using it right out of the box. Or you can, as you go along, you can create and share user-defined queries. We've also got reporting and drill down into device details. And you can download the result set into a CSV file. It's built on the Big Fix Fast Query channel, and it has a debugging tool for rapid content creation. SunTrust Bank had a need for this real-time and continuous visibility. They needed visibility across 50,000 endpoints in 2,300 branches. They deployed Big Fix across their enterprise, and they were able to reduce patching cycles and endpoint vulnerability. Today, they maintain a 98.5% patch and compliance rate across their endpoints, and they've reduced their patching cycle from 3 weeks to under 3 days. There's some great benefits to continuous visibility. We can use discovery and reporting to know what's on the network, see what's connected. We've got real-time visibility. We can see what's going on right now, not the last time the endpoint reported. Remember, we're asking the endpoint. We're not querying a database. We can automatically remediate based on the current state of endpoints across over 90 operating systems. And we have unprecedented first-pass success rates. Let's talk a little about continuous compliance. Now, this can really be where the battle is. But with Big Fix, it doesn't have to be like that. Think about your security policies. Those should be treated as a floor, not a ceiling. meaning that your minimum baseline state of policy enforcement should be compliance, and that becomes a foundation for your broader security program. BigFix monitors and enforces the security configuration compliance of all endpoints on a continuous basis. Any endpoints that are found to be out of compliance can be automatically remediated and brought back into compliance, whether they're on or off the corporate network. Or they could be quarantined to prevent the spread of malware or whatever else the vulnerability happens to be or happens to cause. By ensuring all endpoints are configured per security policies, attacks can be reduced considerably because the vulnerabilities are reduced, mitigated, or eliminated. With BigFix, there are no more surprises because we have visibility into the vulnerabilities, and we can act on them to maintain continuous compliance. We maintain continuous visibility because we see the real-time state of our compliance and vulnerability. We can see what changes and when it happened. We can get real-time reporting. We also have, as we saw a minute ago, the ability to interrogate our environment at any time for any information we might need and get that information back in seconds. Now let's look again at the web user interface, the dashboard, and see how it can benefit our ability to maintain this continuous compliance. We can see at a glance in real time the vulnerabilities in our environment, allowing us to make informed decisions about what we will do in order to protect our environment. Now, whether you're looking at this from an operation or security view, having continuous real-time visibility into this information is of immense value. And it allows you to maintain that level of continuous compliance that maybe you never had before, primarily because now you have continuous visibility. The two go hand in hand, and they benefit both the IT security's ability to identify vulnerabilities and IT operations' ability to remediate those vulnerabilities, and for everyone to see the continuous compliance in real time. The web client improves accessibility, and it eliminates the dependency on a Windows-only console that runs on an endpoint. We have real-time visibility into subscribed sites and status of endpoints. We have a simplified workflow that makes it easier to navigate, and details are organized in this simple tile format. And just like the executive dashboard, you can customize your views to display real-time data, and you can add customized views or custom tiles to get a broader perspective. U.S. Foods had this requirement to avoid the peak and trough and maintain continuous visibility into their environment. They needed centralized management and needed to replace cumbersome management tools. So they deployed BigFix across 15,000 endpoints and were able to reduce patch deployment times by 80%. They were also able to save over $500,000 by ensuring license compliance because of the visibility and enforcement, and they avoided non-compliance audit fines of over $1 million. Traditional point-in-time compliance with regulated standards or your own custom policies is a pointless exercise, because as soon as the audit and assessment is over, it's very easy and frankly very common to slip back and become non-compliant by non-enforcement of controls or configuration drift, human error, or not patching in a timely manner. Point-in-time compliance is extremely labor-intensive. BigFix is unique in that the endpoint agents automatically and continuously enforce policies, such as patches, configurations, and the like. Once the initial policy is applied, the BigFix agent checks to ensure that the endpoint remains in compliance. If a patch or configuration is changed, BigFix automatically and autonomously reapplies the policy, ensuring that users or malware can't compromise the endpoint policies. Now let's look for a minute at the traditional compliance approach, which is signified by the red line on the chart. We have someone, probably on the security team, who develops compliant policies, and they run an assessment tool or tools against that policy. They get the findings, and they forward those to operations, and operations makes corrections as the workload allows, probably one item at a time, to ensure compliance using different tools than the ones security uses, which generates different answers to questions like, how many endpoints do I even have? Users make changes, or time passes, causing the endpoints to fall out of compliance again. And then you have to start the assessment all over again, usually on a monthly basis. The IBM compliance approach is that security and operations using the same tool work together to formulate policies and service level agreements. Operations implements the baseline, the floor, the patches, the configurations, or whatever it might be, across all endpoints in the organization. Policy compliance is then continuously monitored and enforced at the endpoint, and changes are reported immediately. The security team can instantly check on the current state of security and compliance at any time. And security and operations is able to work together to continually strengthen security and adjust to evolving requirements. Now, once we have information, we have to decide what we're going to do with that information. We can take action now, or we could wait until a specified time. And BigFix gives us the ability to act on things once we discover them, now or in the future, or both. It lends itself to continuous remediation and allows us to standardize compliance. This is an example of using the web user interface to take action on patching. Taking action in the web user interface is done using a wizard-driven process. The first thing we do is decide what we're going to deploy. In this example, we're deploying patches. So we choose patches that we want to deploy from the list. We could also select groups of patches, like critical Windows patches that were released this month. We call these groups of patches baselines. When we've selected what we want to deploy, we click Next. The next screen of the wizard presents us with the target devices for our deployment. In this view, we can see computers to select, but we can also select groups of computers as our target devices. Once we've chosen our target devices, we click Next, and we choose how we want to deploy these patches. We can configure things like start and end time, like a maintenance window. We can choose other settings also, like if we want to download the patches before our start time, so they'll be staged on the endpoint, ready to run when the start time comes. We can also control post-install behavior, like whether or not to force a restart after applying the patches. Once we have the configuration settings we want, we click Next, and we have the opportunity to review and change, if necessary, our action settings. When we have it the way we want it, we click Deploy. And we can monitor the progress of our deployment in the activity dashboard. We can also filter our view according to what we want to see, and we can see what's going on with our deployment in real time. Marsh McLennan had the need to manage 12,000 servers of various operating systems, Windows, Linux, and Unix, and they wanted to do it all from the same tool and at a reasonable price. So they implemented BigFix compliance, and they were able to enforce security configurations. They were able to establish a baseline and maintain it. And compliance enabled them to maintain this level across 12,000 servers around the world at all times with 2 people. The benefits of rapid response are we can see what's happening in the console, or we can generate a report. We can decide how we want to act. We can formulate a plan of action. We can respond to the threat in real time to ensure automatic and continuous remediation. And we can do this across our enterprise. whether it's 150 workstations in an office building or 300,000 endpoints around the world. To summarize what we've been over today, BigFix gives you the ability to have real-time visibility into every endpoint in your environment, no matter where they're located. It gives you the ability to maintain continuous compliance to avoid the peak and trough, report, fix, report, repeat cycle that so many companies fall prey to. And it gives you the ability to use the data that's already visible to respond to vulnerabilities in the environment continuously. And BigFix fits all kinds of environments. Odds are your environment fits into one of these areas, which means we've got a solution to fit your needs. If you want to know more, you can put a question or an entry into the chat window, or you can visit www.bigfix.com. Thanks for your attention today. Appreciate you joining today's webinar and hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you all again for joining us today. Please feel free to type any questions